Question number 6, Metiria Turei.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, tēnā koutou te whare. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister and asks, ka tū aia, I runga I te mana o tana tauākī I mea ake nei, we want to ensure government activities are effective in changing the circumstances that trap people in poverty.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Is the Deputy Prime Minister reviewing those activities, given today's UNICEF Fairness for Children report that shows that not one of the government's policies have improved income inequality in New Zealand?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes, constantly reviewing them, and I'm a bit surprised that that UNICEF do not regard $25 a week for every all of New Zealand's lowest income families, at least $25 a week, as having some impact on the income of that household. We think it does, and actually the families think it makes probably not enough impact, but certainly some.
Supplementary.
A supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with the Children's Commissioner, Russell Wills, that $25 for those few who will get that much will not do enough to alleviate child poverty because the gap between the bottom and the middle is growing so fast?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, it certainly doesn't meet the Children's Commissioner's requirements, although I gather he's indicated some positive reception of it. Of course, alongside the direct income issues and core hardship, the government is investing enormous amounts of time and money in dealing with all the sociological and employment and educational related aspects that keep people trapped in poverty. Because most families can handle a low income for a short time, but it is pretty difficult when they've got to handle it for years and years. And government in the past, frankly, has been a bit passive about that, and we're trying to change it.
Supplementary question, Dr. Pamjit Palmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What changes has the government made recently to increase support for families in need?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the probably one of the more important ones has been that from 1 April this year we have increased work obligations for beneficiary parents, provided additional childcare subsidies for low-income families, and also low-income working families are benefiting from an increase in working for families, and those who can't get a job and are on a benefit, the rates for those families with children have increased by $25 a week after tax. The first such increase in 40 years, and something that actually the Greens didn't support when they were part of a previous government.
Supplementary.
A supplementary question, Maureen Pugh.
How is the government supporting the creation of jobs to help people move from a benefit and into work?
Good question.
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, we're very keen to work with individually, actually, with thousands of people on benefit who could move into work, and we've had considerable success with sole parents, where we have the lowest number of sole parents on benefit than New Zealand has had, I think, since 1986. But that remains, further success remains dependent on an economy that keeps creating new jobs. And the good news is that over the next 3 or 4 years, we're expecting around 173,000 new jobs, and government wants to make sure that a proportion of those jobs go to people who are currently locked into lifelong welfare.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Isn't it the case that government activities have continued to trap people in poverty, given the gap, given the UNICEF evidence that shows that the gap between the poorest families in New Zealand and the average New Zealand family has not improved at all?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, if the member thinks that the actions this government has taken have made poverty worse, and she just clearly is not doing the job of a member of Parliament. Must be missing turning up the select committees, reading nothing in the newspaper and not following any policy, because this government has spent quite a lot of time and money and in fact changing a lot of how the public service works precisely to deal with long-term dependency that is so hard on families and so expensive for the taxpayer.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
So is he saying that it is a successful outcome of the government that we currently have the poorest New Zealand families living on only about half the income of the average New Zealand family? Is that a success for his government?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, income measures are one measure. In fact, there's any number of income measures. You can pick the ones you like. The fact is the benefit system has been indexed to inflation, and you can decide whether it's good news or bad news, but wages have been rising faster than inflation. I mean, the opposition are always trying to say the cost of living's out of control. Well, you can't have it both ways. In fact, wages have risen faster than benefits. That is why it's so important that for those who can work, we provide personalised services to tens of thousands of them so that they can get into work and cover that income gap.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does he agree with the UNICEF Fairness for Children report that failing to close the inequality gap will risk children's health and education outcomes?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, I think that's a real oversimplification. What puts children's educational and health outcomes at risk is when government doesn't try hard enough to educate them when they get to school, regardless of their circumstances. And fortunately, we have a Minister of Education who understands that, and school by school is bringing about significant change in attitudes. And actually, it's the same in health. That is, when a child turns up, we should care for their immediate need, but also understand the context in which it occurred and act on it. And that is why further changes in primary care and whānau ora are starting to have an impact for New Zealand's most needy families.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. So is the Minister satisfied by the drop in New Zealand's ranking to 31 out of 37 OECD countries for worsening educational inequalities for our poorest children?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, of course we would be dissatisfied even if it hadn't dropped, because New Zealand's education system has historically not been that good at overcoming socio-economic disadvantage despite its good intentions. That is why the changes going on in education now around understanding children's progress and what it takes to improve it are so important, and it's good that the education sector has stopped resisting those changes and is now enthusiastically embracing them, and I'd expect over the next 10 years we'll make a lot of progress.
Question number 7.